being. I'm going to start off tonight by asking Councilman Seda if he would please lead us in the invocation and the pledge.
Heavenly Father, we know the greatest wisdom always comes to those who choose to follow, serve, and honor you. Be with each councilman as he exercises wisdom this evening. May we honor you through our discussion, debate, and votes, and the results of the decision be truly beneficial to the citizens of Pickens County. In your loving name, Jesus, dear Lord, we pray, amen. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have one item on tonight's special call meeting agenda, and that's second reading of an ordinance number 626 to provide for the issuance and sale not exceeding $12,750,000 aggregate principal amount of general obligation bonds of Pickens County, South Carolina, to prescribe the purposes for which the proceeds shall be expended, to provide for the payment thereof, and to provide for other matters related thereto. Ask for a motion and a second to constitute this second reading.
Motion.
I have a motion by Dr. Wilson. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Vice Chairman Cosman. Discussion on the motion. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Nothing else on tonight's agenda. I do ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. No. Councilman Seda, you? I vote. Okay, yes, okay. So that's unanimous. We'll adjourn our special call meeting. I'll now call us into our committee of the whole meeting for tonight. And since we just completed the invocation and pledge, we'll just roll into the meeting, and you have to bear with me a moment as I pull up, trying to be like Councilwoman Limble and go electronic tonight. I'm not as smooth as you are.
If that doesn't work, I'll share.
I'll say I may need you to. So I do know that we have a couple items on tonight's agenda. The first one is log number 214, which is sewer capacity. Mr. Roper.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of council, if it pleases you tonight, we have, I apologize, I'm behind here, discussions about a sewer study, a sewer capacity study that this council has provided funded for this year. As we go into that sewer capacity study, we have two partners with us in our intergovernmental agreement for sewer capacity. The town of Central and the city of Liberty are in that three-part agreement. Some months back, I guess, Andy Rondo, who's sitting here beside me with the city of Clemson, came and approached me about the potential for the city of Clemson joining in with us in some type of sewer arrangement. I ran him off and told him to never mention that to me again. But he came back and was persistent. I told him that I thought, since we're in a contract with the town of Central and the city of Liberty, it would be wise for him to talk to them as well. And so I think you have this in your packet. Both the city of Liberty and the town of Central have passed resolutions basically saying they believe it would be a good idea if we entered into a joint study of this problem, a four-way study of this problem for kind of a regional solution to the potential that might exist for a regional solution. So in order to discuss that a little further, I'm going to turn, if it suits you, Mr. Chairman, turn my time over to the city administrator in Clemson, Andy Barnes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all for having us. When we first started talking about this, we went and talked to Liberty and Central, and their councils passed resolutions saying that it's okay if the city of Clemson would like to pursue a study to create a new partner in this agreement. And the current partners are under no obligation to whatever the study comes out with. But right now, we're all growing at a rapid pace and being pressured down there with the growth. And treatment facilities are very expensive. I know that the one we're working on right now, well, I just did one in Cochran Road. It was $16 million. To do something similar in Pendleton is $65 million. So just my share in that plan alone is going to be $20 million, unless we can get some more money from the state. So if you can use an existing facility such as what you have at the mid plant, which is ready to be expanded, that serves that entire shed, I think the county can stand to have some savings in this as well by bringing in new customers to help with the operating and capital expenses on this road. And you can tell everyone that you expanded the plant, you got Clemson to pay for it, at least a good bit of it. So Ken said, instead of doing an independent study, if we were already doing one, maybe it makes sense if you just participate in our study, which I thought makes a lot of sense, seeing how you own the plant. And possibly look at a two-pronged approach to this thing. Maybe one is a little bit on the policy side, like on how the agreement would work with the partners and the economies of scale and investment by each partner. And the other, just a preliminary engineering report to talk about the needs of the basin and what's possible at that plant, how much it would cost, funding scenarios, things of that nature. So I have money in my budget to help pay for this. I'm the one asking to be a partner, so I feel like I'm the one who needs to pay for it. I'm not asking Central and Liberty to help out. So I'm just asking permission, I guess, tonight to see if y'all will let me help pay for your study. If we can. Now the study, I asked an engineer who's done one of these for us before. He says you're probably looking at a cost of between $100,000 and $200,000. Way closer to 100 for a study of this nature. So I guess with that, Philip, do you have any comments?
I think it's definitely something that we could explore. Pickens County is changing, so we need to be flexible and see what the study shows.
Any questions?
I have questions.
Councilman Sanders.
When you look at this, you gave us right here. Right? This is, now tell me what this is and what these tables are in the back.
So, and I can't speak to some of the specifics in the tables other than just to tell you that what you're looking at, what you have in your hand is the agreement between Central Liberty and Pickens County that basically determines how we fund and allocate capacity for that system. So that's
So that's an agreement from 2005.
It is, and we continue to operate under that. It's, you'll hear us call that the IGA. That's what we loosely refer to that as, the IGA. So you're talking sewer operation expenses, sewer capital expenses. You'll hear us refer to the IGA, which governs the way all of our relations in regard to sewer work.
Okay, now these tables in the back, they're not from 2005.
No, and you're referring to tables, and I'm not looking at the same thing you're looking at. What?
Like if you look at tables,
Pickens County PSC.
let's see, like you got a table, just these tables, I'm just kind of curious where they're from. You don't see these right here?
Oh, I think those come from Clint Dickey, the Public Service Commission Director, and he's calculating rates of different scenarios there. I don't really know, I mean, I'm certainly glad to pass on any questions, but I don't think that's relevant to necessarily to this question, other than just the general larger scheme of what we're doing. Tonight, what we're asking is that we look at capacity. There is a report in there that I know I might have to put my hands on it, but it talks about the capacity in the middle, and it talks about how it's a 1 million gallon a day plant, and that 1 million gallon a day is basically spoken for up to about 600,000 between the three partners. So we know that it's soon, very soon, we're going to have to talk about expanding that plant.
Okay, that's what
And
this.
so we're just talking about doing a study of the best way to do that and potentially having Clemson also involved in that. This is just a discussion tonight, as far as I'm concerned, obviously, sure.
Just adding that.
It's just adding them to the study, not to the IGA itself at this time. It's too early to say.
The study will be to expand that plant.
Right, that's right.
Okay, so does it look like he has proposals how to expand the plant here?
Not yet, that's what part of the study would be for, to determine the most efficient way to do that.
What's the guy's name?
Clint Dickey, the Public Service Commissioner, the director, he came, I guess, during the budget work sessions and talked about this in a different context. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, is that study going to include how much capacity?
He's not the mayor.
Oh,
Minister, Mr. Minister, sorry.
I didn't mean to demote you. Is the study going to, I know there's been talk about, there's many gallon capacity at the present plant, and I know there was discussion about having 1 million gallons increase in capacity. But I'm believing that plant can go up to 4 million gallons. I'm not certain of that, but will the study include how much it can go up and if you can do 2 million instead of 1 more?
I think it's gonna look at several things. I think it's gonna look at the, anticipated growth coming to the entire basin. I think it's gonna look at your current permitted but not yet under construction, your immediate and long-term needs. And it's going to look at the physical capabilities of the site.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to say, okay, here's what you need, here's what can happen, but this plant, it sounds like you've got the land and it was built to be expanded. So it sounds like you're very well positioned to be able to do that. Now, the question that's going to come in with the study is, do you go to 2 million now and then later build it? Because we'll have to look at, it's not going to be any less expensive to go to 4 million than it is tomorrow as it is today. I mean, so you'll have to look at how much. Now, I would recommend overbuilding because my philosophy on utilities is you don't build them when you need them because it's too late and it takes time and they're very expensive.
So the study will address that.
It will address that, yes.
Sure. So I want to clarify what we're voting on tonight. We're voting on allowing Clemson to become a part of a study that we were already going to do. And Clemson's offering to pay for what percentage of it?
We'll have to figure out what we'll send out a request for proposals, we'll see what the cost is gonna be. And Andy and I will have to work out those details. I don't recall the amount right now, I apologize, but the county's already allocated in the Public Service Commission budget a certain amount to conduct the study, so that'll give us a starting. But really, before we went any further, because we have a contract with these two other municipalities, we wanted to make sure it's okay with them and with you all that we look at doing this regional study.
Does it make the study more expensive to include Clemson?
It undoubtedly will, but I believe they will be more than willing to.
But they're going to cover any cost from that.
My proposal is you let me pay Central and Liberty's piece. So I'm the one asking to come to this table.
Okay.
I think that would be appropriate.
That's more than fair.
Yeah.
I'll make the motion that we allow Clemson into the study. That's my motion.
A second.
Discussion on the motion.
If you don't mind, I was on the planning commission in 2011, and the clearest disparity for economic opportunity in the community that the planning commission really can't do anything about is a lack of consolidated sort of strategic partnering with regards to the utilities, particularly water and sewer. I mean, that was 10 or 12 years ago, and it's clearly not improved, so the more partners, the better.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Sagan.
what is the percentage right now that, you said there's about 625,000 being used now?
But not being used necessarily allocated.
Allocated? Okay, what are those allocations now?
You can look in the data you have. I think I pointed out, this is the page you look at, there's a flow inventory.
Is that in our packet?
It's in your packet. But it's pretty granular stuff. I think the better thing for us to do would be have Clint come and talk as the expert on that part of it.
But just out of the 600 and some odd thousand, what's the allocation now?
It's Exhibit A. So the City of Liberty is at 14.96%, Town of Central at 21.38%, Pickens County at 63.66%.
Oh, I apologize. I thought you was talking about the allocation per individual customer.
Oh, my apologies. I misunderstood that. Maybe I'm what you're.
No, that was good. No, you're right. So you're saying Liberty's got 15%, Central's got 21, the county's got the rest?
It's basically a 60-40 deal with the 40 split between the two cities.
How will it change when Clemson gets it?
But that's to be determined. There's no proposal even on the table for that We'd have to look at the potential solutions, come back to you all with what would be a proposed deal and make sure that it fits with what your goals are.
Or whatever you do, you're capped out at around 4 million for the whole basin.
Well, for that plant.
For that one plant.
Although you ask an interesting question. One thing the study would have to address is we can go plant after plant after plant, but what can the basin handle?
That was my understanding, was 4 million was the basin's capacity.
I think it's more than that. I think it's more than that.
Okay. I got you, okay.
I was thinking 4 million as well, from when Clint was here.
I think that's the maximum on that plant. I could be.
So the study's going.
The study's going to
iron all
address
that
these
out.
things. That's right.
So if I remember correct, that number, but that was part of the study was to determine the reality.
I'll just say this, the footprint for a pump going from 50 horsepower to 100, the footprint for a tank in diameter, right? You know, adding 3 or 4 feet of diameter, all of that stuff scales pretty easy, and particularly it's a linear increase in labor, but it's an exponential increase in total capacity when you start scaling stuff. So you get a huge value out of doing it. You're going big early, right? I mean, if you're going to scale it, you're going to try to bring it up first. It's definitely don't try, because you got to tear down a tank to put a bigger tank in. Good work. Yeah.
Other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. Item 2 on tonight's agenda is the ATAX application. I believe we had a request from the city of Pickens that we placed on tonight's agenda for ATAX reimbursement. Do you have anything more on that, Mr. Rucker, other than the email letter that we have?
The letter's all that I have. I asked some follow-up questions at the request of the council members, but basically the number we have is what they've given us and requested. We also calculated, and this is a rough calculation because we put together overtime, the property rental that we had to do, sorts of things like that, equipment. So, but we believe our costs are going to approach but not exceed $30,000.
So Councilman Said, I know you originally brought this to us. Do you have any more other than what they've given us in letter?
Well, I actually talked to them on the phone, and I asked them 2 questions. What have you actually spent? And they said it was less than 20,000, so that's a little bit lower than that. And I said, has the Trump administration reimbursed you? And they said no. That was as of Thursday.
And that's still true today. I checked with the city administrator today.
So I would make a motion to give them $7,000 and $30,000 to the county as well. Cover those costs. I think that money's available. What was it? It was about $60,000 ATAX money? Yeah, so that's my motion.
So I have a motion for $7,000 to the city of Pickens of ATAX funding and $30,000 to the county in ATAX funding for reimbursement.
Yep.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Dr. Wilson. Discussion. Ms. Lindman.
Well, okay. My first question is the city of Pickens prepared to put together an application for ATAX? Like all the other organizations we've done ATAX with, there's several sheets of paper where they talk about the economic benefit, they talk about what they're going to do with it. I realize this is different, I realize this came after, but this is just a memo with some things, and I want to know how you got to 7,000 from the memo they sent, because it has police, fire, public works.
I think that was the motion that Henry made last time, and I was okay with that.
How'd you go from 21? This is not even this is not an ATAX application. This is a.
Well, you can only pay for the safety element, and the safety element there is about $10,100. So I think you picked 7,000. I thought that was fair.
When I talked to Davey about it, Davey said that they had to make a one-time purchase of like 6 or 7 security cameras that they would get to keep, so there wasn't going to be any refunding from the campaign. The campaign, according to Davey, was going to buy bottled water. Well, I worked that day, so maybe you guys can say whether or not there was free bottled water through this. At the end of the day, there were probably significantly more expenses, particularly expenses carried by the campaign or whatever. None of us have ever had to pay for the sheriff's deputies to check in at polls for our elections that I can think of, right? Because it's something partly what the county is paying for, and the cities as well. So to me, the EMS piece of it, because it did go so well, they put so much into it, shouldn't at the end of the year be an impact negatively on those organizations. their resources in Pickens are significantly limited. So why not partner with them from the ATAX money? If they're asking for general fund money, I'd be against it, because we have our own costs. But there's a reserve in the ATAX. And there's other costs that the city is bearing that's not here, that's not got to do with anything related to the EHS. And to be blunt, good guy. I mean, there was a ton of folks, right? It was exactly what we're looking for from ATAX. And, you know, from 5,000 to 75,000 folks that visited, they had to stay somewhere, and they had to eat somewhere, and they had to buy stupid hats somewhere, right?
I guess my point is, we're kind of casually saying, let's give them $37,000, but I haven't seen.
No. We're
If
saying
they
give
tax.
them 7,000.
7,000 to the city and allocate 30,000 back to the county.
So, you know, I interrupted you, go ahead.
But I'm clarifying, I'm saying, we're talking about $37,000, and yet we haven't seen, like, documentation of these expenses.
So the county's 30,000. One of the things I tasked Mr. Roper with when we said we were going to discuss this for the city is, I looked at it as, forget that it's a campaign event, forget that it's anything, because our folks that work, the sheriff's department, we have a deputy here tonight, sheriff's department, our EMS folk, our folks that staff the EOC, and there was a team of county people that had zero political buy-in to it at all. They just knew they had the job of keeping the residents of Pickens County safe and making sure that they were prepared and able to handle the situation, whether they were for or against. In fact, I had someone at the sheriff's department pretty much tell me that unless you had receipts, you were working that day somewhere doing something, receipts of paying for a vacation in advance, because it was truly all hands on deck. We had overtime costs, we had labor costs, we had all kind of costs at the county level because of that. So the 30,000 for the county is what Ralph Greeno, who's our finance director, can justify and tie directly to that day and that event in manpower and those kinds of things that would fall under ATAX. So I asked Mr. Roper to do that since we were talking about this, because truthfully, that's going to come out of our budget. That's going to come out of general fund. That's how we'll have to offset that. And if you look at ATAX and the purpose of ATAX, to your point, whether it was 1,000 people or whether it was 100,000 people, there was a bunch of people here that spent money somewhere, which is what ATAX is all about, right? And so it seems fitting to be able to offset those costs. Those costs have zero political ties, as much as it is 100% about keeping the residents and the people safe here.
Okay. May I
Please,
comment?
please.
When the city of Clemson twice has hosted over 1,000 people downtown for the watching of the national championship game, it's not a university event, it was a city event. They paid municipalities like easily for that police help. The city knew that was coming and they paid for it. When the university has a football game, which brings in around 100 to 150,000 people, the athletic department pays Anderson County, Pickens County, and all the municipalities to bring in help. So we have precedent when a major event comes that counties and cities agree to pay each other. I don't understand in this case why the city of Pickens agreed to something. The county stepped up, and of course I admire everyone involved. We had to step up. We could not be there. It would have been unsafe. We had to be there. I get that. But why? The city of Pickens said yes to the event. The county's being stuck with the bill. That doesn't quite make sense to me when we have precedent that when other cities have had major events, they've had to cover the cost.
So I do hear what you're saying and don't disagree with what you're saying. There is a little difference, and you actually bring up a great point. There's precedent that maybe some of the municipalities should be filing for ATAX funding and requesting ATAX funding because they put on events that meet the criteria. You could argue whether or not watching the national championship game downtown Clemson is going to really bring in tourists. That's your argument that you would get with that. But I don't disagree with what you're saying. There are events held all the time that would qualify for ATAX funding that people don't ask for. I'll be honest, I am the one that asked for Ken to evaluate for the counties for selfish reasons. It's number one, we have ATAX funding. You said about 60,000? 75,000 in ATAX funding available. that is eligible to offset the cost or the burden that was put on us. So I am selfishly saying, let's look at that so that it doesn't come out of the general fund. That's $30,000 of taxpayer dollars that we can spend on another need.
But we could also, why aren't we invoicing the campaign for that $30,000?
We don't have a purchase agreement with the campaign.
But that's not our fault, we don't have a purchase agreement. The city of Pickens didn't get a contract.
Correct.
So why don't we invoice the they came, they cost us $30,000. We should invoice them for the expense that it brought. I mean, because, look.
I mean, do we invoice the Azalea Festival for the expense that they incur for the police? I mean,
Well,
That's where I was gonna go.
let me respond, do you mind? I think there's 75,000? 70, okay, so there's plenty of money. Everybody who's requested has mostly gotten what they wanted, right? It's an extra 70,000. They said they had 30,000 in expenses. I mean, I think they treated about 500 people where they stood, as far as heat exhaustion. There was probably 100 people they brought to the treatment center, and I think 25 went to the hospital. So, I believe the cost was 30,000.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think that should come out of the general fund. I mean, A-tax, that's what you have A-tax for, is to bring people. A lot of people stayed overnight, things like that. Like Henry said, I think the city incurred for fire and police about $10,100. So giving them 7,000 of that, I think, is fair because they had additional expenses. The Azalea Festival, we give them 7,000. They don't bring 50,000 people to Pickens. I mean, it's not even close. So Clemson football, they operate at a profit. I mean, they have a gate, they have TV contracts. I mean, they pay their coach how much a year. I mean, they can afford it. The city, I don't think made money on this. As far as not applying for an application, yeah, maybe they can put an application in. Maybe they should, but I mean, I support it for all those reasons.
So, Vice Chairman.
Okay, so I agree with you on they need to put in an application. We need to see, this is just like everybody else does because we made everybody do the same thing. The extenuating circumstance is it came across very fast. I agree with Councilman Seda in the sense that it was, it's accommodations tax is meant to be used for these purposes, just like Clemson Rowing Club asked us to give them money. We don't ask them to invoice us, or we don't need to invoice them for any cost. They say, we're putting on an event, it's gonna cost this much money, here's what we need, and we decide whether or not, based on the recommendations from the A-Tax committee, whether we do it. So I think to be fair and equitable across the board, because the Azalea Festival did not receive any money because they didn't get their application in time. And we held them to their feet to the fire on that.
You're not taking 7,000?
That is for the next year.
Oh, okay.
For last year. So the point is, we made a stipulation. You got to turn in an application. I agree with you. Turn in the application. But to me, it's no difference than Clemson Rowing or Take Us to Farm Days or anything else that we do when it brings in people to the county, and that's what the purpose of the A-tax money is for. Then this committee or council has always said, yeah, we're going to try to support that.
If you don't mind, to clarify, when they didn't get their foreman on time, that was a year we allocated most of the money. So they weren't able to compete because they didn't qualify, but we didn't have an overage. In this case, we got like 70 grand worth of extra, 75. So we said,
I think 75.
right, so we're talking about half of it going. So we can vote tonight to do it contingent on getting an invitation. But I mean, let's be honest. I mean, how much detail do you need to have before you know that this was meets all of our qualifications? Other than
To me, it's just a formality, but yes.
Right. And then the Clemson folks, I mean, good Lord, Pickens has not got the revenue potential, to invest and to support and to take on these kind of tasks, right? Clemson, on the other hand, has an entire architecture associated with it, and leadership team and everything. So their resources are significantly different. If the town of Central or Katichi had decided that they could support an event like this, right, we certainly would have to step in and help them in every way, right? So we help all the cities end up having their own burdens.
I feel like I could have the conversation about A-tax if we need to use that and cover our general fund after we've moved forward with an invoice to the campaign. Because here's my thought. South Carolina is the first primary in the South, first primary for Democrats. There are going to be campaigns that come through here in the next year and a half. They will most likely come to Clemson or Easley just for population, but they will be here. If we set a precedent that when a campaign comes, we're covering it with ATAX. The Republicans currently have 14 nominees for president. If all 14 stop in Pickens County, this is going to get real expensive and go through our 70 to 75,000 ATAX. I think the precedent you set, if you say a campaign can come here and we will cover you with ATAX, is a dangerous precedent as we are entering an election year and we are a major primary state. And they will come to Pickens County. And so I think, so you're either setting the precedent, ATAX will cover campaign visits, or it won't. If y'all are not, if we're not willing to move forward by starting by invoicing the campaign, I understand that this campaign may not pay us back because the city of Pickens made the choice to not ask for a contract. We are stuck because Pickens didn't get a contract with the campaign. But I believe very strongly we need to invoice the campaign. Otherwise, we are setting a precedent that all the campaigns can come through Pickens County and ATAX will cover their costs.
So, Ms. Linville, I want to respond to that, and I understand the spirit in which you're sharing it. I really do, and I hear every word you're saying. I really do. But, and this is a big but. That's why I prefaced everything I said earlier about it's not about the campaign. It's about we're stuck taking care of the people, and we got to make sure we can take care of the people. Your numbers were pretty close to what I heard, except from my medical sources, it was over 600 contacts. It was 120 were at First Baptist, 110 through the bus, and the rest were just in general. And there were a little more than 25 transported. At one point, Cannon was extremely overran with patients, and so on and so forth. We didn't ask for any of that. I don't care if it's Donald Trump. I don't care if it's the Pope or whomever else comes to town on a 100-degree day at noon. You know, that is call it what you want. I don't disagree. Let's invoice them. In fact, I'm willing to amend the motion to say after and they have been invoiced. The key there is not letting the time lapse on being able to use the funds because we have till October. Okay. The key there is,
what's the deadline on that? ATAX been
according to the state, October.
Thank you.
So I don't mind adding that amendment to invoice first and as last resort. But my whole key is it literally whether, you know, I probably wouldn't go see some things that showed up, but that doesn't mean others won't, right? If it brought people in and it put a burden that we didn't account for, $30,000, we didn't account for in our budget, ATAX money fits the definition for being able to use it. And I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I guess I was more of a realist because I asked the question up front about billing and recouping those funds before they, you know, right when they announced that he was coming, before it ever happened. So that's where my spirit is. So I will make the motion to amend the motion to bill before the 30,000. So that's second on that. Discussion on the amendment.
So could you just explain what, so we're gonna try to build a campaign for 30,000?
Yeah, it's not unprecedented.
I oppose that. First of all, I think we weren't stuck. I thought it was a big plus for the county. It was a big plus for the city. And then to turn around and send them a bill, I think it's gonna be embarrassing. You know, I think if it was a bona fide campaign expense for the Trump administration, I think they would pay it. It's not. It was not a bona fide. For our EMS costs and police costs are not a campaign expense for the Trump campaign under the law. So they're not gonna pay it. And they shouldn't have to pay it. You know, they just won't. Like when the Republican party has a convention in Charlotte, and Charlotte hires police, that's not an expense for the campaign under the law. They don't have to report it. It's not an expense. So they're not going to pay it, and they shouldn't. They should pay what a bona fide expense is, and that is not a bona fide expense of the campaign. So,
Vice Chairman.
So I find myself in a precarious situation agreeing with you. I don't think this is where we are funding campaign events. I'm looking at it purely as you had suggested, that this is an event that came to Pickens County, and whether DeSantis comes or whether somebody else comes to Clemson or anything else, if the county incurs costs and we can recoup it through the A-tax because it fits within the definition of those parameters, then I think we're foolish not to do that to save the taxpayer that money. Why would we? I don't see it as a, again, and I can't think of a good analogy, but if there was another event that just happened to happen here, there's a big eclipse that's going to come. It's not, it's already happened, but you know what I'm saying? And all of a sudden we've got to pay for all these extra police protection, and we actually had that. That did happen out at Southern Wesleyan University. We had a ton of people out there. We didn't incur that much cost, but I wish we'd have thought about it then, because we could have actually paid for some of those things out of our ATAX funding had we had any of the money left over. So I disagree with you that we're sending a message that we're paying for campaign events when we're not paying them anything at all. We're paying ourselves for the work that we've done to protect the people that live here.
According to the memo the lawyer sent us, though, there is history of campaigns covering expenses. Campaigns have come through South Carolina and paid for their expenses.
I'm not basing it on what has happened in the past. I'm saying based on this event, just like I mentioned with the eclipse, if the eclipse had happened on a day that was 100+ degrees and people were dropping like flies, and 110 here and 120 there, and we had to pay for that extra support, then we could have used ATAX for that, because people came from all over the country just to see that eclipse. Same premise here with this one event that happened. I don't see it as a precedent-setting thing in that we're funding campaigns out of ATAX, because we're not. We're actually paying our people back for the work that they're doing to support.
So it sounds to me like if a lot of people come, then ATAX can cover it. So if it was an unsuccessful campaign visit, we might charge them, but if it's a successful one, you're going to cover it with ATAX.
No, I'm not charging anybody for it. We're not going to charge the sun for the eclipse. No, I mean, if we incur costs based on whatever event happens, and it falls within the definition and boundaries of what ATAX is there to do, then why would we not take advantage of that?
I can be possibly persuaded to move ATAX money, and probably my vote won't matter anyway, but I don't understand why you wouldn't first invoice the person who came here and caused the expense. That's what I
see that as a complete separate issue.
So, and I was actually just sitting here thinking, listening to you, and Councilman State, I kind of agree with what you said a little bit. There may be precedent, and I can think of times and places where you're required to have X, Y, Z if you want to hold an event. And you know up front you have to have X, Y, Z. Unfortunately, we had nothing to do with the planning of this event, and we had nothing to do with the X, Y, Z of the event, which then that makes me question, because I said, we send an invoice. So do we send it to the Trump campaign, or do we send it to the city of Pickens?
That's a great
question. Because the city of Pickens allowed the X, Y, Z. Well, here's the argument against sending it to the city of Pickens. We're responsible for those services that we're reimbursing in the city of Pickens 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's ours. Now, do we need to be upset that they didn't consider and have an agreement in place? That's something where we have room to, if we're going to be upset over anything, but you really don't have a leg to spend on to build the city of Pickens for those services, other than to say, hey, consider us next time because we got to make sure we can pay for this. There's really not an argument, because it was set up, it did occur, and it is our responsibility to provide those services in the city of Pickens. Now, if the city of Pickens had their own EMS, they do have police department, but they don't have the sheriff's department, which is a whole nother constitutional thing. But they don't have, if they had their own EMS, we could have stepped away and said, it's all yours, have at it. And if you need help, you can call us and we'll do our best. But they don't, which is why we did have to step up. But to your point, the more I think about it is, that should have been on the front end. And when I look at the event planning that I've been a part of, especially when it comes to public safety, all that was determined in advance. You got to have X, Y, Z. We have certain rules for use of our facilities. You have to have certain things in place if you're going to use it. So we can't punish somebody because the city of Pickens didn't do that. I don't think we have grounds.
I'm happy to send this invoice to the city of Pickens, to the Trump campaign, and several people I know called the city of Pickens to ask who was funding it and were told to direct all questions to Senator Graham. So I don't know if he was, and I had heard some rumors that, or somebody at City of Pickens Hall told a friend of mine on the phone that Senator Graham was going to be covering some of the expenses. This could all be rumor at this point, for all I know, but there's a lot of pointing of who thought somebody was going to cover it, and all of that pointing has ended up on county. Of course we met our obligations, and I am incredibly, I'm not saying we're not gonna pay our police and EMS, of course we're going to pay them. And this argument of taxpayer money, if we send ATAX to this, we're not sending ATAX to something in the future. It's all moving around the same funds. I just don't understand why you wouldn't start by asking the people who booked the event to pay for the expenses they incurred. That's all I'm asking, and I am fully aware, based on this long memo that the lawyer prepared for us, that the Trump campaign historically has paid for some events and has not paid for others. And my guess is this event that didn't get a contract is probably not going to get covered. But I think it is important that this council set a precedent that when a campaign comes to Pickens County, they have some obligations to understand that there will be police and EMS expenses, and we would like them to cover it. Because some campaigns have and some haven't, that we at least need to set the precedent that we would like to bill for our services. I understand it might not get paid because a contract wasn't met, and that's a whole other issue that we can have with the municipality. All I'm asking is for that invoice to say that, so that we have the precedent in place that that's what we do.
I asked Davey, and Davey said they couldn't pay for government services because it's a government service. You go to we hosted it, right? We're the community that had the opportunity to host it. We benefited in a lot of different ways. We provided those services to protect the taxpaying citizens of the community and guests that came here. I think about things like you don't have to just be right, you got to look right. And then after the fact, sending these folks a bill seems kind of chintzy to me, so I'm not going to vote for it.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I feel the same way. The city probably had a verbal agreement, from which you understand, that they would, the Trump campaign would provide certain things, which they did. I think they were going to pay some vendors. I think they're going to provide water and things like that. And the city embraced it. You're not embracing it. That's the difference. The city embraced it. As a councilman, I embraced it. I thought it was good. People came here. I think by and large it was positive. I think people probably overall made money here and there. I agree with Mr. Wilson. I mean, if we send them a bill, it's going to look like we didn't want you to come when we told you we were okay with it. So I understand. I think if it was a true campaign expense, they might actually pay it. But it's not going to be. The policing EMS is not under the law. So, like I said, the national convention would be a good example. I mean, the campaign doesn't pay for that.
I just have a quick question. Are we voting on the 30, or are we voting on the 7, or are we voting on the both?
We're actually voting on the amendment first.
Or that would send them an invoice. Right.
Okay.
So that's the amendment, send them an invoice?
That's the amendment. And I would say the only thing I disagree with you when they're setting up the national campaign, that would all be in the planning. Mm-hmm. So all those services would have been covered in the planning. And it probably wouldn't have been to the same extent and level that we had to do for this. I only know that because I've done it. Like literally, I have done it. So I don't disagree with what you're saying, but at some level it would have been in there. And whether it was they are going to pay for police officers or not, that would have all been clear in the beginning. There would have been a hindsight's 20/20 on that.
But I think the city would actually pay the party to have a convention in their city.
You're right.
Well, like they pay the Olympics, you know.
You're right.
I think it's just such a winner at some point that the cities pay to have these events and these conventions. I do believe.
Well, they do.
So,
yeah.
So
they spend millions of dollars to get them to come. Yeah. A lot of times.
Yeah.
No, I don't disagree with that. That's all part of the package.
You know, I'd like to make sure I understand what you're saying. If there'd been a proposal in the past and they just said, hey, would you guys like for us to bring this big show to town and bring all these other folks and get all the people to come or whatnot, would you guys put in $37,000 of your ATAX money? Without even blinking an eye, we would have probably approved it, particularly at the scale that event is at. So, same thing. So, I mean, if the amendment was contingent upon receiving some documentation, similar to what other folks provided, it'd be easy, but to send out an invoice, I don't support it.
So I will call for the question of the amendment, which is to invoice prior to the 30 and then 7. So that's the motion on the table, the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? All right, so back to the original motion, which is 30,000 for the county and 7,000 for the city of Pickens.
Mr. Chairman,
Vice Chairman.
I'd like to amend that, but I do think that they need to follow the same protocol as everybody else. I'm fine with paying for it, but just fill out the application and send it so that we have a paper trail of exactly what the money is going for. And so I would just amend it by asking for that application to be put through our system for the 7,000. But the 30,000 is for us.
I have a question. You basically just brought this in and said, hey, this is what the city's looking at paying, right? When we're talking about ATAX.
They sent it to me.
They sent it to you for the purposes of maybe getting some money from us?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was thinking there for a second, I might have to put the paperwork in because I'm the one that put the motion in to give it to them, right? Do I need to fill it out or do they have to fill it out? Can I just fill it out after the meeting?
It's probably more involved than that.
You sure?
I'm sure.
I mean, we've seen some pretty chintzy, I used that word twice now. I never used it before in my life. I'm gonna get the Scrabble thing to word tonight.
Yeah.
So I can't just, because it was my motion, right? Am I not making the proposal?
They need to be the ones putting it, because there'll be some hard numbers in need, right?
Okay.
So I would second that the $7,000 contingent on them filing an application.
So I have a motion to amend to contingent on, the 7,000 be contingent on the application. Any discussion on that?
I have a question.
Dr. Wilson.
When you say hard numbers, we don't normally get hard numbers till after the event. They do, like, for the Dacresville Farm-based guys, they always kind of track where folks are coming from, right? But years they don't, years they do. But most of these events happen at the guess that they're gonna have a whole bunch of folks, right? And then we hardly ever see any kind of documentation. We know there was a ton of folks. I mean, there was an absolute pile of people, right? So, I mean, a big event would be just the people that y'all had to do emergency services to. So to me, we already know the numbers, right? The numbers we're asking for, which is impact. What else do we need?
Mr. Chairman,
Vice Chairman.
in my mind, it's just stapling what you've got to the application. It just goes through the process. I'm looking for the formality of it.
Yeah.
I'm not looking for anything else.
Okay.
I just want to treat everybody the same.
Right.
That's my intent.
I think it will help us when we do our state reporting if we've got a clear paper trail like that. So
Okay.
I'm not looking for this necessarily we had 74,313 people that did this. I'm not looking for, that was not my intent. My intent was just that we treat everybody the same.
We get a package.
Additionally, they asked for 21.2 and you said responded with 7, so maybe some application would help us line up those numbers.
Oh, I get your point, right? So they asked for 21, but we can't do all the things.
Right.
We're only doing a certain percentage of the other. So we have a motion on the table to do it, right? Can I amend the motion to do the full 10 then?
So the actual motion on the table is the amendment to require an application.
Okay, so I can't amend the amendment for
So I would like to ask for a vote on that before we make another amendment.
All right, fair enough.
Any other discussion on the amendment to require the application? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All right. Dr. Wilson.
Because I don't remember where the 7,000 came from, right? And as an engineer, sometimes when I make up numbers, it sounds like it's plausible. So I know that the percentage here that can't be spent is the non-EMS related stuff. The other personnel, you take that out. So what's 6 plus 3 plus 5? That's $15,000.
Might I suggest that instead of us coming up with the numbers, if they're gonna take the time to complete an application, maybe they could request the number?
But if we're going to vote for it tonight to approve it contingent on the application, we have to approve a certain amount of money, right?
Why do we have it
So,
now?
Vice Chairman.
They did, again, I'm back to my original point. All they didn't do was fill out the application. They requested, do I have 20?
21,285.
Okay, they requested that amount of money. Just like if they're going through the ATAX committee, the ATAX committee would look at it and they would give us this long report and say, here's what they requested, here's why we're saying they should give them this. We're kind of saying, based on what we know about what we can pay for, what we can't, they requested the 21 blah, 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 and we're gonna give them whatever that total comes out to be. That's all I'm agreeing with you, and we should pay for, out of ATAX, what we can based on the rules of ATAX. So I don't know what that number is. I don't have it in front of me.
Mr. Chairman, I think, and Allison, you can confirm this, ATAX can only pay for things that have to do with life safety, right?
As far as staffing goes.
Yeah, so it looks like they have 6,400 from the police and 3,700 from fire. So I got 10-1 from them.
Aren't these, sorry to interrupt, it says these are our projections. Wouldn't they have the actual numbers now that they can put in their
Yeah,
actual
she said
agents?
it's a little less than 20,000. Yeah.
I guess what I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, is why don't, instead of us approving a number tonight, why don't we wait until they get the application and do this next month with an actual number?
I actually don't disagree with that. That was one of the things, Mr. Roper, when he and I spoke, Mr. Greeno had to close out payroll for that pay period to have a guesstimate on what it cost us for that event. And that's where that number came from was,
That's where the 30K for county,
Correct.
right, but we don't have
Correct.
the cities.
we do not have it from the city. So I don't necessarily disagree with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
So if they came back with more and said it was more expensive.
They might, yeah, but
I got you.
instead of just agreeing to a number, let's let them tell us what they need.
The only thing that you do by saying 7,000 is what we approved is that would be the penalty for not including us in the original conversation to make sure we had a contract in place to try to recoup some of this. Potentially would be the only thing you gain by cutting them off at 7,000. Vice Chairman,
Did you make a motion?
I did.
your motion,
Was said 15, but it's right, it's not, it's 10. My motion was to, if we're gonna approve a number tonight, then let's approve 10, the whole amount there, 10K that they asked for.
so did I have a second on that motion?
Second, to approve $10,100 for the tax money, the
So-
city of Pickens.
Which caps it, right?
That means they can't come back for more?
I mean, why wouldn't they come back for more if we leave it open-ended? So my opinion, it's capped because you guys didn't include us. This is all we got. Didn't fill out the paperwork in advance, blah, blah, blah. Fair enough.
So I have a motion on the table to amend, from 7,000 to $10,100. Discussion over that.
And, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, so that is police and fire only?
Yes, sir. Your life safety.
But again, this was their projections, we don't know actual numbers.
But they're always projections. From every event that we get, it's always a projection, because it's a
Right.
future event.
But this is a special occasion, which is why we're allowing them to specially submit this later, and they have to fill out a form. So I just don't understand, why wouldn't we just wait and see how much they actually spent before deciding how much money to give them? That's just what I don't understand.
Vice Chair.
Councilman Little, that was your argument a minute ago, that other places don't actually know what it's going to be. They give us projections and we approve it based on that.
Yeah, okay.
Other discussion.
One more thing.
Councilman.
So 10-1, yeah, that's cap. You come in with 15, sorry.
They don't, yeah, that's it.
Okay, thanks.
Unless they make a proposal.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? So my motion, Madam Clerk, just to make sure that I'm on board, my motion is for 30,000 to the county, 10,100 to the city of Pickens, pending an application from the city of Pickens. Is that my motion as amended? So that is the motion on the table. Any other discussion over that?
I mean, Mr. Chairman, I think the 10,100 is fine. The total expenses are about 20,000. That's typically what we give for events that aren't even this size. Actually, the Zag Festival, we gave 12,000, so very generous. I think 10,000 is more than fair. The city will also have skin in the game. They'll pay at least 10,000 themselves.
Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Thank you.
We spent as much on legal fees, right?
So,
Sounds like there's
for the easy stuff, the next item on tonight's agenda is UDSO. Mr. Roper, I've asked for a little bit of an update over some of your meetings and things. So I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. We've had 2 of our 3 planned public meetings. We had one Easy Library meeting we were able to attend a little over a month ago. And then last week, we had one at Pickens County Performing Arts Center that was not attended at the same level that in Easley was.
Yeah.
However, we had a good symmetrical conversation with staff, council, and members of the public. it's a good matching number. That being said, we have accumulated some public input at this point. We have one more of these events coming up tomorrow night at the fire station on the Trail in their community room, if you know where that is. I think of that as the back way between Ingalls and Lowe's on Saturday night. So that's what that is. The community room there in Clemson. That's tomorrow night at 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. We'll receive more public input. To go through just kind of an overview for a couple of minutes, I'll go through some more public input, and we've got our impact study expert here to kind of give a brief overview of that in just a few moments. These are just in the order. This is in no particular order. You probably had this at your place when you came in tonight. This is just some general comments that we received. One of the comments we've received multiple times is that we need to increase the open space requirement. There is a feeling that with the open space requirement for subdivisions being 20%, the proposal that you all have been debating and have reached a rough consensus, it seems around, is 40%. Several of the public comments requested increasing that to 50%, with stipulations on the other 50% is to be developed. So that some of the comments we received said go to 50%, also give us good setbacks from adjacent uses, also give us setbacks and open spaces that join the subdivision next door. So if your open space on the subdivision next door is here, don't put the one over here on the opposite side. They actually come together, which I thought was very good feedback. Concern about increased traffic with increased development. The current proposal that you all have reached kind of a rough consensus around for now in the discussion is that if there is a development of significant size, that we beef up the requirements for the traffic study that would allow someone to actually move forward and build, for the county engineer and the bridges department to evaluate that study, and the developer would then need to support that additional infrastructure before they were given permission to go forward. So it's, that feedback we've received, and it fits with what the council has already been discussing. Concerned about the impacts to our roads with increased development, again, we'll allow the impact fee study. Hector is here, and he'll talk about that in a few moments. Concerns about stormwater issues related to the increased development. This is actually the larger comments we've been getting over the last couple of meetings, and y'all remember the stormwater impacts, that our setbacks are not enough, our buffer yards for creeks and waterways are not enough, that our buffers between different types of uses are not enough. And a lot of those are stormwater related. If you recall at the previous reading that was actually sent back to this committee, we beefed up the stormwater ordinance. And so we'll look at that as well. I think the public is right to look at that as a place that we can do some improvements. Impacts from developments inside municipalities is a little more difficult to address, although you'll see the portion there that talks about annexation. One idea that council's had, because annexation has come up in both of these public meetings, and I will assume that it's going to come up in the Clemson meeting as well, is that folks out in the county are frustrated with the way that the cities annex, or the way that the timing of their annexation. They feel like that there's something going on with developers that allow impacts outside the city limits. So one of the proposals that's been considered, that we've discussed in the past, is having transition zones around the cities. I know there's been more conversation there, but that's coming from the public. Quality of home construction has been a concern. I've heard it at more than one meeting and casual conversations. We are limited there somewhat with the International Building Code. That is the law of the land and the law of the county when it comes to building codes. So they would meet that if they don't. Attainable housing. We do need to talk more about attainable housing, because in both public meetings, people have raised that issue. Increased trash to our landfills has been something that people have raised. Again, that's an impact fee that we have to talk about as a part of that study. And then the impact on our schools. That's something we've had a long-standing practice of meeting with the school district twice a year to discuss these kind of capacity issues. But that's more of a staff level conversation, and maybe the council wants to direct us to do that more frequently. That's an overview of what we've heard in the public meetings so far. Not to really get into debates on those, but I think what my takeaway has been is that the county council is talking about the very things the public are worried about. It's probably because you're getting phone calls, you're getting emails, you're hearing from these people the same way we are on the staff level. I think there is a a certain sauce that we can mix with several of these ideas together that will address much of the public's concern, and we look forward to that conversation in the coming weeks. But for tonight, Mr. Chairman, if it suits, I'd like to introduce, we put this out to bid, and we're very pleased to get a good response back from DTA, Finance DTA. And we have Hector, whose last name is slipped my mind. Perez, Hector Perez is here, the successful bidder. If it suits the council, would like to talk for just 5 or 10 minutes on the overview of how these impact studies would work and how they would be useful in our conversation.
Please.
Thank you.
If I may, I know that I'm in a good meeting because one of your first items was sewer. And so I thought, oh, this is gonna be good. I'm like, oh, anytime you start with water or sewer capacity, I'm like, I get excited, I apologize. I'm a slight nerd. But you know, what wags the dog, right? So, we're DTA, David Townsend and Associates, been around for 45 years, sort of a big picture overview. Approximately 85% of our clients are municipalities, cities, counties, things like that, IGAs as well. So that was also something that pricked my ear as well. The fact that you're collaborative and you're working together and things like that. And that 15%, we work with developers. So we know how developers work and we respect it. And sometimes they call us and say, can you help us build 6,000 homes in Texas? I'm actually the lucky guy that's actually the project manager for that. And so we say, sure, absolutely. But what is the entitlement to the benefit, community benefit to the community? What are they getting out of that development as well? Which is a big conversation for your county. Your county is not special, it's not unique. Everyone is going through some of these issues and it's growing pains. And I like the fact that you're looking for a nexus study that sort of has the methodology, that sort of has the math to everything that you want to address. Because development really should pay its fair share, but what is that share? And what is that, what is that dollar amount? So we're here just to mention that that's the process that we do. We have a huge database request that we've already given to Trad and you all. And as far as financial, building permits, other things and what have you, to give us an idea of what the county wants to do in basically the next 20-year window, basically through demographics and population. We gather all that information, and then we basically calculate it, and based on the demographics, housing units and things like that, we come up with a methodology, the math of it, to be able to present that, not just to you all, but also to the building community. We're very experienced working with the building community in multiple states, so we understand the push and the pull of that, and the challenge of it, quite often. And for us, it's been pretty positive, because we like our math, and we believe in it, and we have not been challenged of it for that in the courts or anything like that. So, and we're happy to share it with it. Once we gather that information, we'll be talking to almost every single important staff person, other persons within the county, whether it's road department, water, wastewater, fire, EMS, things like that, to be able to understand what the inventory is. Where do you see yourself now? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? You've got a comp plan, you've got the Highway 11 corridor plan, other things like that that you've been working on, which is fantastic. And we'll also look at your budgets for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years to figure out what your vision for the county is. As an old finance person, quite often people say, well, I've got a vision. I say, well, show me your budget. And once I see your budget, I can see if you have vision. And because those generally don't tell wrong. So that is why we're here. We want to be able to create that nexus, create the math, and create the responsibility for new development. We can't go back and pass and cure deficiencies or things that weren't working or legacy decisions that perhaps were not the best. And we all live with that personally and professionally, correct? But for new development, we do want them to pay their fair share. For school impact fees, roads, fire, EMS, do you need a fire station out when you're building another 1,000 lot home area or things like that? And so we provide that information to you all. That is just something fancy about some of the other stuff that we do because they make me do that. And we've been doing this for a long time. We work on small projects. As I mentioned, 6,000 home lots, which for us is kind of small, to bigger projects. We treat them all the same, regardless of the community that we're in, and take that seriously. Most of our senior managers are municipal advisors as well. And as municipal advisors, as your finance folks will know, and Mr. Roper will know as well, is that means that we have a fiduciary responsibility to Pickens County, which goes beyond just doing fiscal analysis and making sure that the numbers look nice. And of course, impact fees are just a tool. You know, it all depends what the tool is, how you shape it, how you use it. You've got ad valorem, you've got other costs, you've got MSTU if you're in the county, municipal taxing service units, other things like that. So impact fees are not going to solve everything, or your entire impact, but it's just a tool that the administration, that you all as the policymakers have to be able to say, okay, show us what you like to build, and we'll see how that fits in within our plan, within our policy, and then this will be the dollar amount that you'll be assessed. And there is benefit to growth. We all know it. I mean, there is some benefit, but we want to make sure that it doesn't outstretch our services for water and sewer and things like that, or schools or roads. Because when you build a road, you don't build it just for 5 years. You build it for 20. You build it for 30 years. And if you're a good engineer, I heard someone mention an engineer. When you're on a road, you drive on the left-hand side because that's where the potholes are fixed. And so, but from a county perspective, you want to make sure that all your roads are sort of pretty safe for the most part. What else? We do economic impact analysis that doesn't have to do anything with impact fees, but we throw it in there as well because we understand offsetting revenues. The development may come in and say, well, instead of an impact fee, we want to donate X amount of land to a school or something like that, which is a wonderful idea. And then that's for you all to consider, for staff to consider as well, in lieu of certain costs or certain exactions, which is not what an impact fee is. And that's in a nutshell what we do. We've been doing it for a very long time. We serve as best practices. We've reviewed, I don't know, dozens of impact fee studies, development system fee studies in North Carolina, for municipalities and counties, just for that purpose, to make sure the gallons per day are the right ones, that their math is defensible. If I can say that correctly, that their math is defensible, not just in this body, but also with attorneys. Because we want to make sure that everyone understands what the math is. At the very end, in this very sort of not long process, but in this process, we'll ask for that data. As good as the data is that we receive, that's going to be as good as the work product as well. And we will provide you with, a draft and then a final report, which you'll all be looking at and fine tuning. And based on this meeting, I know you'll be fine tuning it. And I say that respectfully. And we'll give you 3 options. We'll give you 3 options for staff decisions and for policy discussions and internal discussions about where you want to be compared to other things. For instance, before you all invited me to come tonight, I actually have a meeting about an hour and a half to the right over in another county because they wanted to have the same conversation about impact fees. We're getting overwhelmed. What's happening? How can we? Developers wonderful. They want to hook up, $500,000 homes. We don't have connection fees. We can't do that. So our job is to sort of try to figure that out, and with your staff and your support, and just do it together. So
I will say, Mr. Perez, thank you, but and certainly want him to be here for any questions y'all may have about this process. But one question I would anticipate you're gonna ask, which I've already asked, Mr. Perez and I talked about it before the meeting tonight, is he understands our tight timeline. He understands our 6-month moratorium, our potential for 90 days beyond, and where we are in that 6-month range. So this is gonna be a lot of analysis that's gonna give us hopefully some tools to look at how we can address the real impacts of this type of development. So I wanted you all to know that he understands that we're not gonna be studying this for a year.
No.
This is something we gotta get on.
No, we don't want to study for a year. You know, if you study for a year, you've got the wrong consultant. Let me just say that up front. So, and 6 months is enough time to do that. We shouldn't get into that extra 90 days or anything like that. Once again, it's the quality of the data that we get back, the responses, and we'll just not provide you with numbers. We'll provide you with a whole Excel spreadsheet and things like that, so you can actually see it. So if you want to move the digit, if you want to move a number, it'll move the entire workbook for your wonderful finance folks that enjoy that. And so we're looking forward to that. So 6 months is plenty of time. And
We're within that 6 months.
yeah, you're within that 6 months. Oh yeah, oh absolutely.
Wait, our 6-month deadline is October, right?
Right.
September? Okay. All right.
Yeah, no, and in fact, I've already given Travis a mention, data request form, which I'll give to anyone else. Of course, for a kickoff meeting, be happy to come back as soon as you're all ready. Staff is ready. We have to have, a kickoff meeting, basically to meet with the county administrator, county attorney, whomever, talk about ordinances, talk about issues and things like that. Go visit Public Works, road department. Love to go get a little visit with the wastewater treatment plant myself. Sorry to mention that again. And things like that. So we can get eyes on the issue. It's great to say you've got $1 million capacity. You want to go to 4, but how do you pay for those extra 3 and things like that? And what fair share would development be paying if you do go to 4? So we look forward to getting that study as well when that study's. So, and if you all have any questions, please let me know.
Yes.
Ms. Humble.
Could you help me understand the deliverable that comes at the end of this process? I mean, is it like, we've decided your development fee is $4,000 per home? Or is it like 3 options, or is it just an entire scale and everyone comes in at the scale?
That's a good question. Depending on your housing unit, your equivalent in your housing unit, we'll give you 3 options internally to discuss and to look at and things like that.
Okay.
So you can have not necessarily choices, but there's a climate for impact fees.
Right.
And we'd be amiss or remiss not to discuss it or not to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And so we do this all the time. And so we understand that it's a sensitive issue, but development is at your door, and they're knocking, and so we want to make sure that we do that. So we'll give you 3 options for it, for staff to consider, and we won't say, some consultants say, here's the maximum number that you can charge. And you look at it and you go, thank you, that's great math, it's wonderful. And then you go put that into play, and you get probably a fair amount of backlash, I would think. Because someone says, I don't like that number. And so there's no real vetting of it. And so what I'm suggesting is that we vet those numbers, not just mathematically, but also politically and internally within the staff. Because there may be a development, a sizable development, or something that happens in Pickens County, for a town, or for the county itself, that is just so wonderful that needs to happen, but there are other considerations that need to happen as well. But again, everyone pays their share. So, yeah, so it's not just, here's a number, thank you very much, we're on to our next consulting job. That's not the way it works.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? No?
Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry to scare you away from it, but I mentioned sewer and water.
That's right.
So, thank you, Mr. Roper. I appreciate it.
So as far as UDS, so anything further update-wise?
No, other than invite you again to the meeting over in Clemson coming up tomorrow night. And then we will be looking forward to starting to get to where we're going. after we've received that input. So I know you all have got some strong feelings about that, and so I'm looking forward to those conversations, but nothing more for tonight.
Any, Councilman Watkins?
Are we any closer to having this map?
Having some,
The map of the 93-123 corridor, are we any closer?
These transition zones.
yeah, the transition zone, they've stepped out in the hallway, but we actually do have a draft map of that I can send to you.
To all of us?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yes, that's a rule.
Just Councilman Law.
I'll share it.
Thank you. Thanks.
Any other questions regarding UDS? So I do want to, before I entertain questions, say that we did discuss the fact that in the middle of public input was not the time to make major changes or try to make major changes, because that just leads to further confusion. But in conclusion of tomorrow's public meeting, which is the last one scheduled, it will be back full steam ahead. So just keep that in mind. Any questions for Ms. Roper, UDS? All right, hearing none, we'll move to item, fourth item on tonight's agenda, and that is council rules. And I believe we had two specifics that we had intended to discuss. And I don't know that they were in particular order, but I know we have supporting documentation for alternative attendance by a member, and then I've got the rule number. Rule number.
It doesn't say.
It doesn't matter.
2D.
It was 2, yeah. So we can go with alternative attendance by a member. And I do appreciate Ms. Limble. I know we discussed this a couple of months back. You've met with or discussed with Mr. Hendricks a little bit following that meeting. And the conversation was around whether or not we want to consider electronic means of meeting for members to be allowed. That's pretty accurate, right?
Yes.
And I know you had some language, this, that, and the other. Do you want to share? Do you want to?
Sure. Hopefully you'll have in front of you the proposed language that Mr. Hendricks and I worked on. Again, the majority of these words come from the South Carolina Association of Counties rules. But I spoke with Clemson City Council, enacted similar rules a long time ago, and they found that not on their city council, but on their boards, there was a little bit of people coming up with all sorts of reasons why they weren't coming to meetings. And so their compromise had been to put it on a max of twice in any calendar year. And I know that y'all had expressed some concerns to me of someone who might misuse this. I think we can all be open that if there's a circumstance that comes up, we have the right to vote for or against any exceptions to this, but this helps. We added, Mr. Hendricks and I, or he helped with me, adding that just to make sure we're putting a buffer and making sure that somebody's really thinking through their times that they may request that they can choose to do this. The other major change we made is Mr. Sadan had brought up whether or not you have a right to do this, and whether or not a problem with, get your video coming through or internet issues should affect your ability to attend a meeting. And what we thought is, the reason this is in order, the means may be by video if possible, or by telephone if video is not possible and if video fails. So the object being, you're expected to be on a video where everyone can see and hear you and you can hear everybody. If video fails, which it does occasionally, then somebody can hold up a phone. Any of us, a phone can hear and be heard. The odds of us being in a situation where video and phone both fail is probably a situation where more than one person can't come to that meeting. So I believe that covers it. The expectations, you're there by video. If that is not possible, you can continue to participate by phone. If this becomes a real problem, then you're not going to be at the meeting, is what this is saying. But what I'm hoping this does is allow for the person who is caring for somebody at home, who has a transportation issue, who is ill in some way where their mind is clear but they can't otherwise come, that we can keep them from having to miss important meetings. So again, most of this is the SCAC language with an added buffer twice a year and the preference of video first and if not telephone. So my motion is to amend our bylaws to allow this alternative attendance.
I have a motion to amend our bylaws to allow this alternative attendance. Do I have a second on the motion?
Second.
Second by Dr. Will's discussion. Vice Chairman.
I called SCDC and asked about these rules in place in other places, and they mentioned that there are a handful of locations that do it, and they run into similar circumstances with Clemson. With once you open up Pandora's box, it seems to become a problem. So I understand putting in the limiting it to twice a calendar year. I still go back to, you make a commitment to run for office, and I get that life happens. I mean, COVID happened to me, but life happens for people. I'm still not convinced of the unintended consequence of another council 15 years from now taking this and doing something they probably shouldn't, because I know of previous councils that have taken advantage of trying to create this sort of situation where you can have somebody on the phone voting for something. It just, I'm not persuaded yet, and that's what I want to be on your side on this, but I can't get past it yet.
My response one would be, to your point, when you sign up for office, you show up. I think this is another issue. We've talked about how politicians police themselves. You're policed by your voters. If they see you're not showing up, they are unhappy and they will not reelect you. I think we do all have an obligation, but I can't change the fact that my kids may be in need and my husband may be out of town, and I can do everything except physically be here. That might happen sometimes, not just to me, but to future people who may want to run for office. There's illness, there's caregiving issues. I think anyone who's running for office understands they need to be here. This is the compassionate exception, because sometimes this will happen. And frankly, if it gets abused, then you pass a law to change it. That's what's beautiful about these laws. We set them. If we find that we do this for a year and we really didn't like how that meeting went, or someone seems to be sketchy about it, then change it. I think it's more compassionate to allow it for the very few circumstances in which someone might really need it than it is to say no flat out.
Mr. Chairman, okay, so my only thought on that is, if we were going to go down this road of allowing something like this to happen, that it not be I think the rule would be that council vote on each circumstance individually. In other words, prior to the meeting, we're made aware of whatever the situation is. The chairman makes the motion, do we allow this or do we not? And it becomes a council decision on a case-by-case basis.
Ooh, see, that seems problematic.
So I would like to respond to that.
Go ahead,
I'd like to respond to that if I could. So you have a tight vote. And that would be the reason. One could argue to do it or argue not to do it.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Okay, it's the same premise then. I'm still.
So if you don't mind, I'm trying to make sure I understand what you're talking about earlier, because somebody tried to host a middle of the night meeting, and there were 3 folks, and then one person called in, and if it hadn't been for that one person not being comfortable with it, the staff and the administrator may have been coerced or through vote, made to do something that was really hinky.
Yes.
Already happened before. What we're talking about is teams, where you have to be on camera or a conference call where the folks on the camera over there can see and hear everything that's going on, not a middle of the night meeting that happened at sans cameras.
That's true.
We're talking very transparent, right? Yep. And the participation, just to be blunt, calling into a meeting where y'all can't see that somebody's trying to raise their hand and the chairman has to remember to say, does anybody on the phone have anything to say? It puts the member at a pretty distinct disadvantage for participation, right? So what you're worried about, to me, seems to be have been addressed through the inclusion of the technology and the investment they've made in being able to put us on camera. So, 3 people get together and want to have somebody call in so that they can, whatever thing it was, which I believe that my understanding was it was pretty cheesy. I think that the risk of that is a lot lower, right? The other side of that coin is if you want, we talked about last time we were here, we're having a sort of a congenial conversation, generally speaking, when what other folks would consider like making up notes. We're talking off the top of the head. We're trying to communicate. A number of us are fairly open to being swayed if the argument, is not already congealed for us, right? Or somebody's got, like Chris, has got more expertise in EMS. I mean, it's educational for us to participate in discussions. As a member, and particularly like representing your community, you're at an incredible disadvantage when you're doing it on the telephone. I had a team to manage, and they were all in other cities other than me, along with everybody else in our organization to put me at a disadvantage, right? I respect that I would want to be here, and other than just life events. So I think your issue has kind of been addressed, and I completely respect why, because, nothing positive has been said about what tried to happen, I think, if I'm understanding what you're talking about. But the technology's addressed it, and she's right. If it's a train wreck and people abuse it, right? Because first of all, how are you going to keep somebody limited to twice a year? You're going to make her not connect them on telephone? That seems kind of difficult, right? You get back to, well, they would never let me do it, and I've got cancer, and I'm in the hospital during those hours. That kind of stuff, right? So we already have enough things that people can concoct political issues out of. So to me, it's just do this. It's modern America, man.
So I think, to your point, Rule 1, a quorum of the body is physically present at the meeting location. Does away with the trying to get someone on the phone for the quorum.
Yeah.
That alone does address that. I agree with that. One concern I do have, and just being quite honest, and I am not knocking on the IT department in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I know that we have made investment in our AV equipment and our technology in this room as well as the council chambers. Are we capable?
The note I had just written down, you saw me writing it down, says, technology now that council allows virtual meetings, ? That's just a note I made to make sure we will be able to figure that out. We have good people, and we did not buy cheap this time, like we might have done in the past, maybe. So I'm confident about that, but we will investigate, come back with any issues we see. But I'm confident.
We've run into issues in the past, is the reason, and there's nothing worse than a Teams meeting with the echo, and nothing worse than, are you on mute? Can I go ahead and mute? Nobody wants to hear that all meeting long. So
Mr. Chairman, I'm the IT guy at my place, and everybody in my team can get into Teams and see each other's computers and share files and whatnot. And I mean, I am the worst possible IT, person on the planet. I think the Microsoft pretty much makes it fairly seamless.
You would think.
If we all kind of follow the protocols of staying on mute unless you're talking, right?
Other discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Say that.
I think if a candidate perceives that they're gonna miss some meetings, they just shouldn't run. I think that's really like the first thing. Can I make the meetings? I think that's really question one. People get to see you personally when you're here, when they sign up to speak, or they talk to you after meetings, before meetings. I think that's very important. It's a high standard, but it needs to be a high standard. You need to show up for the meetings. If you get sick, and I was sick one time, you just miss the meeting. It happens. But I will be voting no for those 3 reasons.
I was just surprised you supported this when I presented it last time.
No, I didn't.
And, well, you had the question about the video, which I thought we resolved. That's okay, you can change your mind.
Other discussion. I'm personally torn. I'm not gonna lie, I'm personally torn. I don't disagree with anything Councilman says, but also know life happens. And I think it's different for life happening versus, just planning on going into it. I'm gonna miss my 2 a year. It's like folks with sick days, right? Some folks will use their sick days as quick as they get them, and some people will retire with 1,000 sick days. And I think you're gonna have every mix thereof. And I think that the mindset and attitude. My original concern over this, and I had conversations with our legal counsel about AI and the technology out there. And it's real. I don't care what anybody says, it's real. All it takes me a couple seconds not as easy with video, but voice. All I need is a couple phrases and I can make you say what you want. And that's scary, but it's real. And the The video piece adds, but I don't believe video is going to be that much further behind in reality. And then again, that is a concern that I do have. Now, it would have to be perfectly orchestrated in order for someone to be able to take advantage of that. But I'm not naive to think that it's not possible. That is one of my largest concerns behind it all. I think you did a good job with covering quorum has to be present. The video piece, I think, is important, and putting a limit on it, I think, makes it real. And I sit here, and it's 2 times too many, is what I sit here and thought. But you get sick in January, and you get sick in December, or you get sick in January, and your husband, wife on a business trip in November, and you get sick kids at home with no support system at all. And I understand you knew it when you signed up for office, but by the same token, you didn't know what you didn't know. I get that piece too. So, Vice Chairman, I'm stalling to try to convince myself of that.
You're trying to talk yourself into it? Well, okay, so here's kind of what I'm thinking. Dr. Wilson, you are persuasive. I don't like any of it. I just don't. However, I do understand that that stuff happens. I don't like it like thinking I've got 2 this year I can use. It's not that. That's not the premise of how you're presenting it. It does make sense with the quorum being present. I will say this about anything that happens on county council. I mean, we can make a motion to undo any ordinance that we voted for. And you can get into the, is it an important vote or is it not an important vote? It's always important to be able to listen and to get information, and so that you can formulate a good opinion, so that you can talk to your constituents, so you can find out what they want to do. This is, I'm doing the same thing you're doing. I'm trying to weigh in on both sides to see exactly how I feel about it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
if you don't mind, I think that this is the best political seat in the county. Right? The potential to have impact on our neighbors is incredible, right? And the fact that we're able to be webcast and reached out to, and we're not going to Columbia, and spending days down there where folks can barely ever come and see what you're doing. I mean, this is a perfect place for government to be local and available, right? You lose that as a candidate, and you lose that as a leader if you're not showing up to the meetings. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I got to come from Anderson and drop my wife off and get here, and got to wait till everybody gets up. We all have stuff, right? But you're going to get here. In this particular case, you're just offering. The reality of it is, we want folks to get involved, and ideally, we would have folks that are learning the leadership tools they need to become ideal candidates to fill these roles when we all move on, right? Or to contest a seat and prove that they're a better candidate than we are. This is the kind of thing that just manifests itself in the fact that not everybody should have to wait till they retire and their families all aged out before they, move into these kind of roles, like all of us have. And we've all, to a certain degree, been fairly flexible with regards to our career paths to be able to participate in the way we have, right? So this is just another thing that allows folks to be able to participate. Because asking people to run, it's like people are going to be talking crazy about your internet. Asking people to run for these roles, and it's, hey, you don't have but about 5% of influence on any decision based on outside entities and everything else in the legislature. Asking people to participate in these things is difficult, right? It's hard to find candidates. Why not be a little flexible?
Okay, so aside from the fact that I think you just called me old, I'm not sure.
We're all old.
Aside from that, you did make me think of something else. Not this chairman, not this council, I don't believe this council at all would ever misuse the power, but I can see someone calls and they said they're going to be sick. Let's go ahead and, I've got 3 days, I can put this on the agenda because I know they're going to vote against it. So I can see how you could politically use that power without saying, you know what, I'm going to be there and I'm going to be present, and even though I'm at home sick, I'm still going to be able to participate in this important vote. I'm flipping it around to agree that this would prevent somebody from using it as a political ploy based on, let's just wait until Ms. Liberal gets sick and then we can vote on whatever we want to do that she was against.
The quorum piece of it.
Well, still, you might need that, it's not just the quorum that you need the votes on whatever.
Oh, I got you, yeah.
Right.
Fair enough.
So that eliminates that problem.
So here's my question, and this isn't clear. Is it any meeting? Is that the proposal? Is it the motion?
It says any meeting on these, yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Secretary.
I disagree with that, Mr. Coxon. The majority votes are 4-2. If a person's missing, the majority vote will be 3-2. So you're really pretty insulated from that type of thing. You know, you really have, 4-2 is like a super majority. Because you got an extra vote there.
Well, I'm not talking about this council, I'm talking about
Right.
future council, we don't know what it's going to be.
Even somewhere down the road. I mean, it's going to be hard to, I just don't see a scenario where one person missing is going to change anything on a majority vote.
Then that makes the argument we should let them participate so that they can at least hear what's going on.
No, I think it's irrelevant. I mean, if the person's there or not, it's irrelevant. I mean, the votes will either be 4-2 or 3-2. You're not going to be able to stop anything. I can't think of a scenario where we can do that. The person's out.
I would have agreed with you until I asked for the numbers several years ago of how many times they had 3-3 dies, and then we had like boom, 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 3 in a row.
If there's a 3-3 vote and there's somebody out,
Right.
yeah, well, you'll get a decision.
Yeah, yeah. But historically, that never occurred. Historically, and then I asked for the information, and it did.
Didn't someone resign, like Ben Trotter or something like that? They resigned so they didn't have anybody to represent them until there was a special election, or to the end. So that dropped it down to a 5-2. I mean, to what you're basically saying, right? I mean, when the plan didn't fall apart.
Right. Other discussion on this? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Thank you. Next item under council rules, vice chair. I think this is.
Yeah, this is something that we've had put in place before. The more I got to looking at it and thinking about it, because we did this early on, it's item D, where no officer can serve more than 2 consecutive 2-year terms in a particular office. And the argument then was based on term, we believe in term limits. I think that can be misconstrued and misread because our council rules are our council rules, so there's nothing under the law, so to speak, as far as what, you can always make a motion to suspend the rules. However, I get that you don't want to have somebody always in place, but I think we're implying that the chairman has a lot more power. So the chairman's role is to work with the staff on setting the agenda, and then to represent the county. They're the ones that get in front of Fox or whoever to say, here's what council voted on. Here's what, without offering their opinion. I don't think it implies, I don't think there should be, it's not that the term limit is every 2 years we vote because we have a new council potential new council that happens within every 2 years. So it's the same group of people or a different group of people, whoever's elected. I think this could be misread to say in the future, okay, you've served 2 consecutive terms, so you can never do it again. And I think that, I think we should just strike that because we added that in, I guess 3 years ago, 3 years ago. And that was why I put that on there, just to take that back off. No officer can serve more than 2 consecutive 2-year terms in a particular office.
So is that a motion?
Yeah, that was my motion.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
A second by Dr. Wilson. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman
So you want to just take that one sentence out, so there's no longer a term limit for any office?
Yeah, because I don't think it's a term limit. It's implying something that it could be read 2 different ways. No one can serve more than 2 consecutive terms in a particular office.
Yeah.
You've served, Mr. Wilson, you've served 2 consecutive terms as the person over the head of that committee. So you can't do it again. Right? Or
Well, these are the officers defined as chair, vice chair, and vice chair?
So I like Mr. Councilman or Chairman Bowers, you served 2 consecutive terms as chairman. You've not been on for the past 2 years, but you can't do it again because you've already served 2 consecutive terms. I think can be misread.
I don't disagree with you. Originally, I didn't read it. I read it at face value. Can't do more than 2.
I think that was the intent.
2 consecutive 2-year terms in a particular office. I read that as being, once you did 4 years, you had to take a break. But it can be read that once you did 4 years, even if you served 20 years, you can never be chair again. It can be read that way.
And I don't think.
And I don't agree with that.
And I don't think that the chairman is necessarily let's all take a turn. I mean, like I said, like the purpose for the chairman is to represent full council. So you got to one person's got to convince at least 4 others to say, we want you to represent us when you're talking to the media or when you go into all these. Let's face it, the chairman goes to a gazillion meetings that we all don't have the opportunity to go to, and they're representing folk. They want to know, what does council think about blah, blah, blah. And we got to have the confidence that whoever that person is going to represent and communicate well for us. And I don't think it's a take turns sort of position.
So, if you don't mind, I was supportive of it before. The different ways that it can be problematic have become apparent to me, based on having this debate. 4 new folks on the board in an election cycle, right? And the best possible choice, because you're going to do a bunch of EMS people, stuff, is Chris. And you just arbitrarily decide that you're not going to be able to have Chris because he's timed out. So you'd rather have some folks that don't know where the bathrooms are yet. That just seems like an arbitrary limit, particularly since, again, it could just as easily just like, okay, we're going to vote to kick this rule out. So you've got all the other things you're talking about, plus you're forced into making a bad decision from a leadership perspective. So let's ditch it. What I thought was a good reason for it when I was initially, I think I seconded it when it first came up, and was pretty voracious about pushing it, was to protect us against something that's very unlikely to happen here, in this council. All right. I mean, and we've all, Smith Road, for instance, and the reasons why that happened is, or some of the ways that the Performing Arts Center was being managed and the reasons those things happened. I think that those are low risk based on awareness and some of the other rules have been changed outside of this. This is my opinion about it. I'm going to talk to you guys in a minute.
Other discussion.
Yeah, I like the term limit. I would actually have 2-year term limit, so I'm in the opposite direction.
So, and I want to, just because of my concern is, I want to understand where you are and where you're coming from, because I don't know that I do, or maybe I do. So you said you like 2-year term limits, so once you serve for 2 years, you're done.
Yeah, then someone else will do it.
Okay, so if you're on council for 12 years, which is not unheard of for some, I think Jennifer was on for 14 years, but she came in special election.
Amen.
Trey was on for a good long while.
He was 12 years.
So was it 12? I know Jennifer had, I think it was either a year or 2 extra. So you're saying if she served in her first 2 years, the other 12 years, she didn't need to be in that seat?
No, it's two consecutive. So what happened is, she would serve 2 years, and then someone else, you could vote her back in 2 years later.
But the way this reads.
Well, I would just change it right. It doesn't read that way to me.
But then
it reads to me that you can't serve more than 2 consecutive 2-year terms for a particular office. So what happens is, once you stop serving, you stop serving consecutive terms. It ends, and you restart at 0 when you restart.
I do understand what you're saying. No officer, but it says no officer can serve more than 2 consecutive 2-year terms.
You can't do 3 consecutive terms.
But you can't serve more than 2. Once you've served your 2, it's should versus shall is what we're getting down to. And and that's where I have, but then the bigger argument, and I think this is the vice chairman's point, the bigger argument is, the reality of it is if the council doesn't want the person to be chair, they're not going to vote for him to be chair. So you're self-policing in and of itself right there. So whether it's 2 years or 4 years or 100 years, it takes someone getting the votes, the majority vote from council to be in the seat. I think was the point you were making earlier. So we do police ourselves in the term limits. And I feel very awkward sitting here because I promise guys, I'm totally good. But at the same token, the long-term or the unintended consequence of it all and the should versus shall arguments, I question, do we need the rule? Because we do self-police. We do vote on it ourselves. Ms. Linville.
To Dr. Wilson's point, if all four, so we switch every 2 years between 4 and 2. Say all 4 get flipped seats. Then you have 4 new people, and the other 2, if one of those had been chair, I think should be able to be chair again, because your 4 newbies may not be in a position to do that. So I think the way we're setting up with the 4-2 and potentially those flipping, there is some benefit of being able to continue to serve. But to your point about self-policing, after the next round, then you've got the other 4, you've shifted, and if they're done with that chair, they'll vote that chair out. But I would definitely want to cushion it longer than 2 years for the fact that you could have 4 completely new people.
And Councilman Sutter.
Oh, you know, like I said, we did on the school board and it worked fine, so. I mean, it's just a preference. And you just have to make a vote. I'm gonna vote to keep it the way it is.
So to be clear, and I do, now that we've been talking about it, I can see where you could read that sentence 2 different ways. But Councilman Soto is saying 2 consecutive years and then you're off, but you can do it again.
Sure.
But he won't say that there. So what do you do?
I think just for argument's sake, and to what Ms. Linville said, what Dr. Wilson said, and what the vice chair said, I think that's the reason for the motion of, do we even need the sentence? Or that paragraph? Or that sentence?
Mr.
You need the paragraph, stop that sentence. Vice chair.
So, and actually what Dr. Wilson said is even, I mean, does tell exactly what you were saying, Ms. Linville. If we know we're going to be taking on if it has to do with construction or if we know we're taking on something big and we really need that person who has the acumen to be able to speak in public, to go talk to these meetings, to be able to do this, we should be able to elect whoever we want to represent us without any stipulations. I mean, if we know we're going to be focused on EMS and we think that the guy who's the EMS guy is the guy, or the engineering guy, or the stockbroker, or whatever that is, then maybe why limit ourselves on it? But because I think we're giving the chairman too much power. The point of the chairman is to set the agenda, to run the meetings, but to be the voice of council. And that's whoever, out of 6 of us, who do you want to represent you when they go to Tri-County Technical's graduation and gets up and speaks and says, on behalf of council, you know, whatever. You see what I'm saying? And the other part of it was, it did read wonky to me that I could see somebody else how it would twist it and go, no, you can't do it, it's in our rules. So I'm just saying, just eliminate it. Let's avoid the controversy and move forward. It's not a seat where we take turns.
Other questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of removing that first sentence from 2D, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Thank you. Is there anything else on the agenda that I missed?
Mr. Chairman, Mayor, even if you remove that sentence, there's a discrepancy in the rules that we need to address. Either remove all of paragraph D, and it deals with succession. And basically what your rule says is, A says that at present that if the chair becomes vacant, then council elects a new chair. D says that should the chairman's office become vacant, then the vice chairman automatically goes to that. So those are not.
Oh,
those are in conflict.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So you could either remove paragraph D and keep the succession as is set out in A, B, and C, or you can remove the blue section in edit number 2 and keep the succession as is set out in paragraph D. but you need to address it because it's in conflict.
So my motion is to remove the entire paragraph. Because we already have a process in place. And personally, I believe that it shouldn't be a succession point. It should be a point of, the council decides who they want to represent. If there's a hole, when he's not here, I run the meetings, but that doesn't mean he's not chairman.
So point of order, we just voted, right? So it's decided, now we're talking about
A different issue.
a totally separate discussion about which.
Just the succession of the office. The question being, if the chairman is, office becomes vacant for whatever reason, paragraph A would have that vacancy, is voted on by council. Paragraph D says that the vice chair becomes the chair. It's automatic. Yeah, automatically. There wouldn't be a vote.
And Councilman say that,
Yeah, in 2019, what you had originally was what you see in blue, right? That if somebody left, the chairman or vice chairman left, or pro temp, you had an election for that person. What we did in April 21, we voted to change and add section D, which was if the chairman resigned, the vice chairman automatically moved up, or if the, and then from there, the pro temp moved up to vice chair. And if the vice chair left, then the pro temp moved up. That's what we added in 2021. The person that wrote this and amended this and actually put this down on paper never crossed out the conflicting information. That's why it's in conflict. So we actually voted to do the succession thing in April 2021. That's why D was added.
so just help me real quick. Say what you did again, tell me where the conflict is.
Okay, so look at edit number 2.
But no, I was asking for Mr. Hendricks.
Oh.
Give me a.
Chairman, so, if you just look at the chair, okay, the chair, his office becomes vacant for whatever reason. Under, A, the council votes on who the new chair would be. Under D, the vice chair automatically becomes chair. And it's the same thing with, vice chair pro tem moving up to vice chair and so forth. So you can either remove all of paragraph D, and it fixes the conflict, or you've already moved the first sentence of paragraph D and remove the blue that is listed in edit 2. So just the process of succession is all you're talking about right now.
So I was on the prevailing side, so I make a motion to revisit previous discussion for the purposes of edit 1 being the entire, eliminating the entire section D, which is what I thought we just done.
That's a separate.
That was my motion, but I wasn't even basing it on the conflict. My original motion, Madam Clerk, was on removing all of section D completely,
I only have the first sentence.
or the first sentence.
So it really comes down to how do you want, when someone leaves, how do you want to choose the replacement? Do you want it to automatically the person move up? Like, for example, Chris won the lotto, moved to Hawaii. Would you want Roy to automatically move up with no vote, or do you want to call another vote? I say let him automatically move up.
So do I have a motion that I need a second for?
Do we have to revisit the last piece of it, or can we just do a separate?
No, we
motion?
voted to remove B, so now it's all about
That's a
succession.
separate motion.
Now you're talking about the succession.
Okay,
Succession.
so I
All
retract my
of
motion.
paragraph D, and it fixes it. And that you would elect a new chair if the chair becomes vacant, or you can,
Let him rise up
or you
automatically.
can, go with, not remove paragraph D and remove a portion of A, B, and C, which is out in edit number 2.
Okay, fair enough. So my motion would be to eliminate all of section D and just have the council decide who their new chairman is going to be.
Second.
That's edit 1?
So I have a motion on the table.
No,
No, edit
the
one, edit
original would be gone.
Oh, keep going.
So I have a motion on the table to go back to the original, removing section D. That is my motion. Do I have a second?
A second.
Have a second by the vice chairman. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Say.
I think the pro temp position is a complete and utter waste of time. It should be eliminated. And the only reason it has any value is if there's an automatic succession. That's one of the reasons I proposed it. If we're gonna go this route, I would just say eliminate it. Because there's no value in it at all. You do nothing. Unless two people just don't show up for a meeting, then maybe they would run the meeting. But that's why I wanted everybody to think carefully about all the choices they make when they hire people or when hire officers. That's why I recommended this. So I'm not going to vote for eliminating D. I would look at edit 2 and I would eliminate the old method, which is the blue, which hung around.
Yes, Chairman.
Vice chairman.
So I still believe that, I disagree that the pro tem does have a point. I mean, it is, I don't think it was ever intended for us to have successions based on somebody leaving for whatever reason. You know, Chairman Bowers winning the lottery and everybody moving up one. I still contend that you want to have people, represent you in whatever capacity with whatever group's there, so you vote for those people.
I have a question for you in that regard. Chairman moves on because he did something hinky. That's like 3 times tonight.
Oh my gosh.
So, huh?
You said chinky.
Chinky.
Yeah, I said chintzy. That's chintzy and then hinky. Okay. So, Chairman does something hinky. Vice Chairman participated, but it wasn't to the degree that he has to resign or be removed. So, you're just going to be stuck with the Vice Chairman who didn't have to leave, but he was involved all the way up to the point of having to be removed. You're stuck with it, right? Because that's what the rule would say. I say just, the council comes together and makes. We should have to affirm the person in the role as by vote regardless. So to me, the whole thing in D there just kind of it happens automatically. That's not the best. We need to be able to, future councils, our council, we need to be able to make the best decision for who's going to represent and lead the whole body, right? And I think I've been vocal about that. I don't want to ever be the chairman because I want to say what's right for my district and for me as a political leader in the community. If I have to communicate as the chairman of the group, I've got to curtail some of the things I might normally say because it's got to represent all of y'all too. Well, so there you go. What if I'm the pro tem guy? I didn't put myself in the pro tem role because I didn't want you guys to both win the lottery together. And then I got to be the chairman because I'm just going to mix it up anytime I want to. That's to me the goal here. The pro temp board doesn't matter. We're not voting on whether or not the pro temp board seat is a good one to have. We're voting on whether or not we want to have a voice and who's going to represent us in case something crazy happens. Seems to me to take a vote.
Other discussion?
For those of us who weren't here in 2021, was the consecutive and the hierarchy both passed at the same time? You all did a full rule review? Okay.
Mimics that of the school board.
And now we're talking about doing away with it?
Well, my particular purpose for putting it, for pushing the motion at the time, was I had my vision of how things in political offices can play out. Made me very wary of the way that the more than 2 sessions, right? Particularly as an observer of the council, the dynamics of this office is significantly different than what you have in the school board. For example, you don't have 3,000 PTO moms out there that can be mobilized through the administration for the purposes of their own rhetorical input into our dialogues, right? They can participate by only getting their voice carried by so many folks in the community in a way that the council can't. And then the other piece of that too is the way that the council is sort of organized. It sort of precludes some of the things that me personally, suffered from with pressure from the school board side of the fence, where they use the school board lawyer as a militant bully to try to push me in directions I wanted to go. We just don't have that here. It's a different dynamic. So I'll just say I was wrong and supported it the first time. And I would very much like to get it off of here because it doesn't represent the character of this particular office. It's different dynamics.
Other question or discussion? The motion on the table is to scrap D. And it's
Leave in place the other.
leave in place the other. With the motion on the table. Okay, no others.
Wait, I have one question.
Ms. Linda.
So what does that do with the last sentence of B, lawyer, Mr. Hendricks?
Councilwoman.
Yes, it says, in the event of a vacancy of the chair, the vice chair becomes the chair, creating a vacancy for vice chair. So there's still, even if we're talking about edit 1 that gets rid of B, there's still.
It's a vote by council. Creating a vacancy in the position of vice chair to be filled by council.
But we still have the vice chair becomes the chair. It's still in B, right? In the event a vacancy occurs in the office of chair, the vice chair becomes the chair.
You talking about C?
And edit the original, the second line, the last line of B. As a vice chair become the chair.
So it should be, that the B's last sentence should be the same as A's second sentence. Any vacancies should be filled by council.
Yeah, you're right, because A says, any vacancy in the chair should be filled by the council for the unexpired portion of the term. All right, but then you're right, B does say in the event of a vacancy occurs in the office of the chair, the vice chair will then become the chair. That's B.
The second sentence is.
So you want to scratch out, the vice chair will then become chair.
How about
So you're
this?
actually doing edit 2, aren't you?
No, it's more
The
convoluted than we
last sentence
thought.
is C2. I think we should, I can't say table casually. Is there a way that we could get like a clean version of what the motion is with lines out? Because I think there's more than one sentence this affects.
Well, that or, the motion is to remove D and the spirit was to elect new representation for chair. And if your vice chair becomes your chair or something happens to your vice chair, you just re-elect. Whatever position is vacated is elected by council.
So can the motion be to, yes, there.
That would be my motion.
Okay.
So my amendment to your motion would be to make the language for all three positions be in the event.
New D.
In the event of a vacancy, the position will be replaced by an election of council.
Yes.
And so we
And
consult,
strike any other verbiage about secession.
so all the blue lines go, the red line goes, and it's in the event.
Don't, there needs to be some more lines. I don't
There's
remember.
more lines,
Go with
but
what you
just
said.
revise the paragraphs A, B, C to all.
Get rid of D and revise A, B, and C to make it consistent with election of that office by council.
So motion to table to the next meeting?
Now, a motion to amend. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion on the amendment. Hearing none, all
Will
those.
we see this at the next meeting?
Yeah, it'll come out of committee as a recommendation from committee, and we'll have to officially vote on it there. Yeah, which is the reason why I feel comfortable doing this, because there will be more debate and conversation. I feel confident. Any discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? All right, now back to the original motion by Dr. Wilson as amended, which is striking D and then changing that language that we just discussed. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Thank you. Is there anything else in council rules that I may have missed tonight? Hearing none. I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? All those in favor? Discussion, all those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. 8:07, guys. I am so proud of us.